Welcome to another Ancestry Sidebar. This is number 9, Vyšný Medzev Baptisms. Today we will look at the village of Vyšný Medzev, focusing on baptisms in the latter part of the 1800s. Along with this, I'll also compare Vyšný Medzev with two other villages that I've done similar analysis for, namely Harichotza and Zavadka. As a refresher, modern-day Slovakia was part of the Kingdom of Hungary until the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the end of World War I. Upper Hungary, as it was historically known, was settled by multiple ethnic groups. Primary among them were the Slovaks, hence this area's ultimately becoming Slovakia. I will use my ancestral village of Harichotza as a representative of the Slovaks for this analysis. By bringing in my ancestral village of Vyšný Medzev, we can key in on another historically important linguistic/ethnic group, the so-called Carpathian Germans, or Karpatendeutsch. They lived primarily in the areas that are indicated on this bronze plaque located in Bratislava. It commemorates the Carpathian German fellow citizens who were forced to relocate out of Slovakia at the tail end and just beyond the end of the Second World War. These areas had been their homeland for roughly 800 years, that is as far back as the 1100s in some cases. Vyšný Medzev was known as Obermetzenseifen in those days, and it was one of those German enclaves. All in all, nearly 250,000 out of 2.5 million people living in modern Slovakia in the 1880s were linguistically/ethnically German. That's about 10% of the total. Since they were concentrated in these areas, many small villages like Obermetzenseifen had greater than 90% German-speaking population. In addition to the Slovaks and the Germans, we can also bring the Rusyns into the conversation. This map illustrates their settlement, which includes modern-day Slovakia as well as much of the surrounding region. Their area of settlement includes this little speck here below Spišská Nová Ves, where my ancestral village of Zavadka lies. In the period of the late 1800s, there were perhaps a third as many Rusyns as compared to Germans in modern-day Slovakia. Still, this is nothing to sneeze at, and again, they tended to cluster in villages like Zavadka, where they represented a supermajority. This area, called the Subcarpathian Rus, was originally part of Czechoslovakia, but in the turmoil following the Second World War was ultimately ceded to Ukraine. Let's have ladies first, and from left to right we see Obermetzenseifen, which I'll call OM as shorthand, Zavadka, and Harichotza, showing the most predominant given female names at baptism. The data for each village are from slightly different time periods, but they're all from the second half of the 1800s. A couple of things stood out to me as I took some time to stare at these graphs. Anna wins out in OM, whereas Maria was the predominant name in both Zavadka and especially in Harichotza, where nearly 40% of the girls were named Maria. While still second most popular in OM, Maria clearly takes the silver medal with Anna standing on the podium. Please note that on all of the bar graphs I'll show, the list is cut off at an arbitrary point to show a reasonable, that is hopefully readable, number of names. Many girls' names appear on all three of these village lists, including the usual suspects Anna and Maria that I've already mentioned. I won't read them all. They're listed here alphabetically. Another observation. The top 3 girl names in Zavadka account for 80% of all names given. In Harichotza, it's 81%. However, in OM, the top 3 names account for only 55% of all the girls' names given. In effect, the names were spread out across a longer list of names in OM. There are spelling variations, and in this analysis I have combined spelling variations that indicate the same name. This is a list of the number of individual names given in the 3 villages. In Zavatka, 18 different girls' names. In Harihoutsa, 17. In OM, however, there were 44 individual names, more than twice as many as the other villages. Let's look at this for males as well. Ioannis still wins out in OM, where it did in both Zavatka and Harihoutsa. As far as the ratio of the first to second name is concerned, it's an even clearer winner. Of course, in the vernacular, the kids with these same Latinized church names would have been called something different. Jan in Harihoutsa versus Johann in OM, for example. We see a similar trend with the top boys' names as we did with the top girls' names, where the top 3 names represented 52% in Harihoutsa and an even higher 71% in Zavatka, compared to about 46% in OM. In terms of the total number of names used in each village, here's the grand summary. For the boys, it's 19 individual names in Zavatka, 22 in Harihoutsa, and over 60 in OM. Here's a view of the names common to all 3 of the villages, but there are plenty of unique ones as well. A little sampling. First, some that have a clearly Germanic ring. Adolphus, Godefridus, Wilhelmus. Some that I think of as Old Testament style names. Melchior, Elias, Solomon. Also, some particularly Christian names. Christianus, right on the nose. Balthasarus, likely in honor of one of the 3 wise men. And, well, this one's kind of strange. Who would name their son Judas? Well, one couple in OM decided to do that, and I don't know the fate of this individual, but hopefully he was more upright than the biblical character of the same name. Let's look at some surnames now, and spoiler alert, there is no Iscariot. This is where the drastic differences show through. In the entire list of most popular surnames across these 3 villages, there is 0 overlap. While there is a vein of consistency in the given names, dictated largely by the commonality of the Catholic Church, whether Roman or Greek, there is a complete deviation in surnames, which leans toward the ethnic division across these 3 populations. Another observation is that the relative proportion of surnames in OM falls off very quickly. In both Zavatka and Harihoutsa, the proportion remains relatively high. It does not tail off as quickly. Indeed, the clustering of surnames is inverted from the trend in given names. That is, in OM, the top 3 surnames account for about 29% of all surnames, where in Zavatka and Harihoutsa, the top 3 surnames represent only 13% and 9% respectively. Put another way, fewer surnames represent a larger proportion of the population in OM than the other 2 villages. I wonder, and I don't have anything more to back this case, if there were more individual names given in OM because there were fewer surnames due to the insular nature of the German community. That there were so relatively few surnames could have driven a trend toward using a wider palette of first names to create a distinguishing feature. Finally, let's peek at the baptism rate and trend. I've expanded this graph beyond the period used for the name analysis, running between 1835 and 1894. What's your first thought? I'll bet you think the rate is going down over this 60-year period. To test this observation, look at the average baptism rate in 20-year chunks. It is 87 baptisms per year during the first 20 years, 76 in the middle section, down to 54 in the final 20 years. I also hearken back to this earlier Sidebar video analysis of the populations of my ancestral villages between 1880 and 1910. The initial trend in this graph, between 1880 and 1890, shows a decline in the population of Vyšný Medzev, or OM, that is consistent with the more granular baptism graph. Baptism is not the only element that feeds into overall population, but one can expect that over the long haul they will be at some level of harmony. The population growth shows a bit of a bounce back here as time continued to go on, but that census data stretches beyond the available baptism data used in this analysis. Let's wrap it up here for today as I say thank you. Please like and subscribe to Full Circle Ancestry. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. Look for more to come soon.